should you be starting us off?
Nah.
You're like the experienced podcaster.
Yes, I'm the professional.
You have your own show. And I'm glad you used the name on your show, by the way.
Armando Casante?
Yeah. I was very impressed.
I have used Armando Casante throughout my life since, and I think it's great that if you go to, I think it's Reunion, which are one of those your class pages, Armando Casante is listed as a Westbrook.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I started through. I was like, who put that up there? I'm glad they did.
Yep.
So Monster Squad, we watched it separately, various times. I'm 40, and Monster Squad came out when I was 7.
You're 40?
2.
I was gonna say I'm 42, and your birthday is I think 11 days after mine. So
you are correct.
Okay. All right. Yep. Just checking.
Yes, I forget. So yeah, that came out when I was 7, which is crazy to me to think. I've known what Monster Squad was, remembering it and thinking. The Wolfman's Got Nards is the most popular, and but outside of that. Now that I think of it now in hindsight, I don't know how much I actually remembered of the movie, except that I really liked it.
So you had seen it as a kid?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think I saw it, I didn't see it in the theater, but I definitely saw it when I was by 9, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that time range. Because, yeah, anyway.
And I was trying to figure out, I've been trying to think back to when I saw it too, because I definitely didn't see it in the theater. And I'm pretty sure my parents would never have taken me to see this when it came out in the theater. And I'm pretty sure that when I did see it, it was at a friend's house that lived 2 doors down from me. I think he had it. But I feel like I've watched it multiple times as a kid. But I never owned a copy, so I don't know if I would rent it at the store, or if I just kept watching it at his house over. I honestly can't remember. But I do remember that this movie, alongside Goonies, which we'll probably get to later, because I don't think you can talk about one without the other, that, it was kind of the movie of my childhood for me. I remember watching this several different times. But it's been a long, long time since I watched it, too. So,
right.
Right. All right, so thoughts on the movie. What stood out to you? What was one of the big things that stood out to you when you started watching?
In watching it the second time. So I was reminded in watching it now how much I hated the Wolfman. I don't like how the Wolfman looks. I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now. And I think it's just his face is not... It's because he doesn't have a snout, I think is... So that's my most...
So it's a terrible Wolfman.
Terrible Wolfman.
Amazing, which they call Gillman. I think that is a pretty cool costume that they used for that one.
Yeah.
So Wolfman stood out to you. You didn't like Wolfman.
Wolfman's costume was off. That's really the only costume.
Right.
All the other ones, fine. You can't. They just tried something new, and it didn't work, I think. I know that they... So, I didn't want to, do a whole lot of... behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But I had seen one thing where they had talked about in that vein of they tried the beginning, that intro scene where Dracula turns out from the bat, he's hanging, sleeping, and he wakes and he's a human. That was strictly for that, and apparently they wrote it that way because it was cooler. That's all there was. There wasn't any reason other than, we didn't want him coming out of a coffin, so we thought, what would be cooler? He'll be a bat.
Yeah.
So I think that's evidence that they were trying things.
Yeah.
Wolfman just didn't work. How about you?
So, and this is kind of I think a big discussion topic about the movie, but the thing that stood out to me right away was some of the things that did not age well with the movie. And so for all of our listeners at home who have not seen the movie recently, they definitely use a lot of derogatory terms for homosexuals in the movie. There's a few other things that I would say are definitely not things that would go over well in a kids movie these days. And so the first time I watched it, I was telling André this earlier, telling you this earlier, I should be talking to you. I started perseverating on some things. And so that's one of the things that I kind of, the first time I watched it, really had a hard time getting past. And I knew going back, obviously, and watching a movie that's from the 80s, that there's going to be some things in there that are kind of would not be in a movie today.
Sure.
And so I was sort of prepared for that. And I thought there'd be some like language issues, especially with the whole like, PG movies back then are much racier than PG movies today, because now there's a PG-13 and all that. But I guess I was caught off guard by that because I didn't remember that as a kid, or as a kid watching it, some of those things went like right over my head. You know what I mean? And I didn't get those references. And so what I kept thinking about too was how I've recommended this movie to so many people in the last, I don't know how many years, and I always be like, hey, have you seen this movie? You should watch this movie with your kids. It's awesome. It's the best movie. And then I'm watching it, and like one of the very first things is they're sitting there dropping, the F word, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's really bad. Or there's this scene with the kids with the principal, and they get done, and they're like, oh wow, he's such a homo, and he was trying to feel me up and stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is so bad. What are these people thinking who I've been recommending this movie to? So some of that stuff, like I had to get past that, I think, and be like, okay, it is what it is. Like, it was a different time. These adults that were putting this in a movie for kids are obviously like, that's horrible that would be like a okay thing to put in a movie. So that's part of the reason why I had to watch it the second time, is because I was spending so much time just being like, cringing at these things. And then it was like, okay, I've got to like accept that and get past that and then watch it again and kind of get more into the gist of it. Because there's other stuff too. There's like they literally have a character called Fat Kid.
Yes.
Like, I know Goonies has Chunk, and obviously that's a fat joke too, but like this one, they're like, we're not even going to be subtle about it. We're just going to call him Fat Kid.
The interesting thing about Fat Kid is when he's first called Fat Kid, it's by the two bullies.
Yeah.
And they call him Fat Kid. My name's Horace. His name is Horace. He has a name. He doesn't like being called Fat Kid. And then you come to find out, like, his friends are also calling him Fat Kid.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, you're right.
and it definitely sets up one of the best lines of the whole movie, and we can talk about that later on too. But like, so that was like a little bit. You probably wouldn't have a character Fat Kid today unless it's the bullies calling him that and the friends don't. And then the stuff with like the sister where they're like spying on her throughout the movie, and then they use the pictures they take of her to like sextortion to get her to help them with their plan. It's like that's not really that great a look either, So anyway, that was the thing, the very first thing that stood out to me the first time I watched it, and I had to definitely kind of get beyond that and just be like, okay, different time. Obviously, if we were making that movie again today, we're gonna change that up a little bit. But yeah, so that was what stood out to me.
So all those are those are the glaring things that I think we've all come across watching it. And anybody who hasn't seen Monster Squad and would be hearing this conversation was probably like, what is Monster Squad? Because we've talked about bullying, which I guess would happen in a kids movie, but the sextortion you wouldn't think of in a Monster Squad movie. And I think though you mentioned the PG thing and the movie being for kids. The movie's actually PG-13, which I didn't realize.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Not that it makes it like so much better in some of the stuff that's in there. And I'm trying to think as far as visually, it's not exceptionally scary or anything like that.
Right, yeah,
it's not super gory. There's
I
don't know, maybe one scene where there's but it's not even that gory. So it has to be like the language and stuff that drove that PG-13 rating, and it makes me wonder who the movie was made for, because if you
I literally have written down as my second discussion point, what age is this for?
Yeah. Exactly, because if you in watching in even that first scene, like the principal scene like you talked about, and the kids are interacting with the principal, and it's that cool the 80s cool kid slick thing, and they get out of there and they're doing their banter and stuff, and they go out and doing the banter with the teacher and all their homophobic stuff going on. But I can't imagine I liked it as a kid, but I don't think I don't remember any of that. So was that what I was watching? Or as an adult, am I going to see this as kind of a farce type thing?
Yeah.
Especially the scene shortly after where where Horace is getting bullied and the kid shows up and lights the match on his shoe after riding in on his bike.
I never thought, thinking back on like the kids I thought were cool back like then, I don't think I ever would have thought like a kid pulling up and lighting a match would be like, oh yeah, that's what I think of as cool kid back then. That is kind of funny.
Yeah. And so in looking at that, I'm like, nobody could have put that in that seriously.
Yeah.
And I've been like, yeah, this is what the people want to see. Like, it had to have been some sort of parody on kids' movies in general in the day, maybe. Because, like you said, Goonies came out, the year before?
Yeah.
So maybe it was that step. And the co-writer, Shane Black, do you know who he is?
Nope.
He did, like, Predator.
Oh, okay.
He's done a bunch of different movies, written and stuff. But if I'm to watch his movies and compare them to today, he's kind of, for me, like the James Gunn of that time period, just looking to make cool stuff.
Yeah.
So, I wonder if that's all it was.
And I guess one thing that would lend a little credence to that is the fact that it was focused on those universal monsters, and those were certainly something that older people would have kind of grown up watching some of those films and stuff like that, whereas I feel like by our age, they still have Frankenstein and the Mummy and things, but not really, you weren't watching a lot of movies as a kid about them. So I was wondering about the age of that too, because if it was supposed to be kind of a parody of those, kids get together and save the day sort of things, I would have expected it to be even more sort of over the top and more like parody-esque. I didn't feel like it was, I think about those kind of parody movies today, like, any of the, I don't know, Scary Movie or whatever, they're really over the top, and you can tell through the whole thing that they're really making fun of the genre or something. And I didn't really get that vibe throughout the whole thing. So, but it definitely feels strange as far as the age for it, because it's like, you've got from a kid perspective, what I loved about it was the young kids getting together, we're going to save the world kind of thing. But a lot of the jokes and the language stuff would have been more, I think, for those teens, or early teens or something, a little bit older. And so I was thinking maybe but then I think I felt like as a teenager, I don't know how much I would have liked it, because the characters would have all been younger than me. Mm-hmm. So it was a really weird fit. And I was thinking maybe that's why it didn't do so well in the theaters as well. There's not really a good target audience. My parents, I said earlier, wouldn't have taken me to that film. Uh-huh. If they knew what the language and stuff, they would have been like, we're walking out of here right at the beginning. And so, I don't know. But again, I feel like older audiences would have been like, oh, it's a kid's movie. So it definitely felt really weird. It didn't quite fit. They went a little too old, but also a little too young in some places. And so it was kind of interesting. But I think what it probably appealed to us as kids is it's definitely one of those movies that you watch and feel like, oh, this is kind of like, I'm kind of being bad watching this movie, or this is a movie, I feel cool because I'm watching this movie that has all these swears and off-color jokes and stuff like that. Right. Even if I didn't quite get them all, I feel like it has a little more edge than Goonies did.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I would have felt Goonies is my favorite kids movie of all time, but I would have felt cooler watching this, I think.
So you think it's kind of like the next step in the movie. So Goonies,
I feel like it's a little bit more risque than Goonies was. And so...
and then you watch Kids.
Yeah, exactly. A good transition to that. So that just definitely felt kind of strange to me. All right, so did you like did you like the movie?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, okay.
I really did like it. And so what I really liked about it was Dracula. As badass as he was. I've seen Dracula movies before, but this Dracula was the most just ruthless.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't care.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see that portrayal of it, and which was, I think, truer to any Dracula, because I see these movies with any bad guy or any powerful being, and they half step it. It's kind of like, you could basically do what you want here, yet you're not.
Yeah.
And Dracula has his faults in this movie, but when he does turn it up. He just turns it up. It's
yep.
Like, all right, you dead. But so I liked that part of it a lot, and I thought it was short. Which is
yeah. I mean, it's funny kind of saying like, yeah, that's got that going for it, but I think it really does work because there's no like lulls in the movie. Mm-hmm. Like it's just once it starts going, like the slowest part's literally probably the opening part of the movie, and then once it goes, it's just like boom, 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 and so yeah, you never feel like it's dragging or anything like that. Yeah. So that's definitely a plus for it. So it's funny you brought up the Dracula on that. So I also didn't try to do like too much research going into this. And I know we had originally got this idea because we were talking about how there's a documentary about it. And we purposely decided not to watch that documentary because we didn't want to get that, lens. We didn't watch it through the documentary lens. We wanted to see the movie first, talk about that, and then go back and watch the documentary. But like, I did afterwards look up some things, and they had said that I saw that Dracula was, I can't remember what website it was, but they ranked the best villains of like the of film or something like that. And so Dracula made it into like the top 25 or something.
Just the top 25?
but it might have even been higher than that. But they said that out of all the Draculas, this was the best Dracula out of every Dracula movie that's ever been. Like he was the most badass. He was great. We're gonna get him. This is a fun thing he does where he says, "I want to come in," but then doesn't. So yeah, Dracula definitely was pretty badass in there. The biggest problem I had with Dracula is like, so he does this great job getting all of the monsters together,
which I want to talk about.
Okay, so we'll get to that. And like there are some scenes where he's totally like just awesome, like he just can do whatever he wants. But he made like two big flaws that pretty much ruined his entire plan, and it was basically came down to him being kind of lazy. Like he sent Frankenstein to go get the book back, whereas if he had just done that himself, he would have just like killed the kids, taken the book, and then the whole thing would have been done. And then the other thing was there's a scene where he's got Wolfman tied up and drugged, or at least he thinks he has him drugged, and then he wants to go eat, and so feed on these women. So he's like, all right, you're going to turn into a Wolfman, but I'm going to tie you up because I know that you're dangerous. But I'm just going to leave you there, and I'm going to go over here with these, 3 virgins I have in the closet. And then Wolfman escapes, and then it starts the whole, like, he goes to the cops and all this stuff. So, like, yeah, if Dracula didn't try to, like, farm out the tough assignments to people, or if he was a little more, I don't know, on top of it, I think he easily could have won the day. But anyway.
So why was he playing 7 Minutes in Heaven?
Exactly.
What's the point?
Yeah. So... but which I also, so going back to that, I never really realized how that side of Dracula is really kind of like creep. The whole like, I'm gonna like they sexualize the whole thing with Dracula. That kind of freaked me out too. But anyway, going.
You know what? that sexualization just made me think of it and I just said the 7 Minutes in Heaven, like. That fits for like a teenage kid or whatever. Like that's sex to them, quote unquote. It's like as close to sex as some kids get to. Like those party games, 7 Minutes in Heaven. So maybe I'm reading into it, but maybe that was like a way to, hey, he's going in the closet with these girls. What's happening? But yeah.
Whereas if he had just stayed and hung out with Wolfman, he would have been better off. All right. So what was your idea? Your thought about him? You said something about getting the monsters together. You had a thought about
that? So it starts out wherever it starts out. I didn't realize that Van Helsing was running around America, but maybe he was. Because that's where the emerald was, but maybe the emerald came from America.
I never even thought about that point.
Yeah,
no, because but Dracula was in
Bavaria,
right?
Well, maybe not Bavaria.
So they never explained how the amulet ended up in this kid's town.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was kind of weird. All right, yes, good point. I never even thought about that.
So there was that. So I was like, well, where's this? Was the amulet there? Did Van Helsing come across country? And then so scratch that, push that aside. Then I was wondering, well, how does Dracula have this relationship with all of these monsters? And, like, how... Because he calls Frankenstein old friend. He calls Wolfman old friend. He may call the mummy old friend. And I could understand that one more. Yeah. The Wolfman I didn't get because he looks like a young person. And he didn't want to turn into the Wolfman. So then I started thinking, all right, is the Wolfman like a spirit, and that's what Dracula's old friend is, or is this truly like a guy who's really old and been around rocking with Dracula for a while? And so that was confusing me for a while. But so when he's gathering the monsters, though, so you see him come in on the plane, and the crate drops, and that's Frankenstein. So I can understand the Frankenstein old friend. Dracula's going to look for the amulet, so he goes and finds Frankenstein, flies him up, gets him onto a plane, and I don't get that part of it. That kind of goes back to what was Dracula thinking? If he's all powerful, he's going to stow away on a plane, and then create attention for the pilots to come out back so they can open up the bay doors and drop Frankenstein exactly where he needs to be dropped into this city. And Dracula just makes his cool exit and drops with him. So they land in the swamp, which is conveniently right next to the clubhouse. Or in that area, because I noticed at one point, as we were panning towards the clubhouse, you see Dracula's cape like hanging on a tree. I was like, oh, so it's right there? And then, so it goes into the water, and Dracula points his cane and rising it up. He's levitating it looks like, but no, it's the swamp, the gill man.
So it just happens to be in that same pond.
And so what was Dracula doing with his cane? Is he controlling gill man at that point? I don't know what was happening. So...
And it also happens that there's a mummy exhibit with the mummy in the town where all this is happening.
So I'm not... Maybe it was fate. Like, maybe it was just this prophecy that Dracula knew about. I don't know. There's a backstory, and if there were 10 more minutes of this movie, we could have gotten it, but... And
there was no... I'm trying to think back now to the beginning. We don't see any of the other monsters in that opening Van Helsing scene, do we?
No. Because watched the first and a half time I watched it, I looked for that. I was like, all right, did I miss something?
So it's not like every 100 years these monsters all come together for this event. It's really a Dracula event. So this time he's gone out to get Frankenstein to help, and all the others have somehow conveniently been drawn to the same place, just like the amulet conveniently happened to show up there. So the writers of this clearly are taking some liberties with, what makes sense and stuff. But as a 10-year-old kid, I didn't think that deeply about it. It works.
Again, it's 86 minutes.
Right, we don't have time to explain this. We just need to keep it moving. There's probably tons of film that got cut that explains how all of these things came together, and then they're just like, yeah, screw it.
We don't need this.
Or probably not. They're just we don't need to explain that. Yeah, so that's really good. I honestly didn't even think of any of that. So
you gotta know.
All right. So, but overall, you enjoyed the film. Thought it was good. I agree. Definitely that the pacing of it is one of the things that I really enjoyed. I thought the story was great. Now, I told you that I loved this movie as a kid. And so one of the things I kept thinking about is, why did I love this movie so much? Like, what was it that was appealing? And in fact, I love this movie so much that I remember when we were in 6th grade, you were in the class next door to me, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the assignments that our teacher gave was to take a film, and you had to summarize the film or retell the film, but use music, like little music samples as part of that. I don't know if you remember this assignment at all. If you did,
Yes, it was like the interview thing.
Yeah, so you did it through like an interview. Right, so I remember this is the film that I did mine around. And so for example, one of the things, the one that I keep remembering, I know there was tons of different things, but one of the questions was, so Dracula, how are you feeling when you got the stake driven through your heart? And then we played the song Wholehearted by, I can't remember who played that. So, but I really loved this movie, but I was watching it, I'm like, okay, so what is it that was appealing to me? So I definitely have a soft spot for movies where kids get together to save the day, right? And that was that's obviously a huge part of this. And what we can talk, one of the things I had on my list to talk about was, what are some other movies that are kind of in that vein? And also how, comparing that to how those movies look today, because I can't think of a lot of those kind of movies, but I don't want to go down too far down that road. But so I had a soft spot for those. I definitely love that whole idea, because as a kid I'm like, yeah, I want to be badass and kick some monster ass and stuff like that. You have to go check on that. I also, one of the things that there's a character named Patrick, so that was certainly appealing to me. But
Patrick?
I didn't even remember. That's the one that he's the buddy of the main character that kind of is a little mouthy and has the sister. And
okay, he's the one with the sister.
Yeah, and I also I connected to Eugene, who's like terrified of the dark, because as a kid I was always afraid of the dark, and so I'm like, oh, that kind of reminds me of that. One of the not so fun things was like the parents and how they like fight through the whole thing. I'm like, that reminds me of growing up in my home. Sorry, Mom and Dad. But yeah, so I think I kind of definitely saw myself a little bit in some of these characters as well. So I think it was just like that perfect timing too of like where I was as a kid, and then I just kind of connected to some of these characters, as weird as that sounds. But yeah, again, it definitely felt a little bit edgier, a little bit badass to be watching this movie too. So I think that was really appealing. But I thought it was great. I loved it. The more so the second watch through than the first one.
Yeah,
but
I think it's interesting. You the points that you brought up about the the things that you connected with, and I think for me, like those connections were pretty subliminal in a way. Like the lead. So in watching it, I see that the lead character or the lead actor's name is André Gower or Goyer or whatever his name is. Yeah. Andre is my name, and as a kid, like anytime, even now, it's like every time I see somebody with the name Andre, I'm like, ooh what's this person all about? And so I think that probably that he may have been the first actor named Andre I'd ever encountered, and so I think that was one of those things, and I think that idea, that kid. The whole clubhouse thing was huge. Like when I was a kid growing up, and before I moved here, when I lived in the Philippines, especially, we lived on an Air Force base, so all the kids and stuff were around, and we were all military families. So all the kids had like wars and stuff going around. We'd have like little clubhouses and stuff, and it was cool to have those little secluded like gangs going on, and seeing that in the movie and thinking, oh man, I wish my treehouse was like that or whatever it was. Yeah. And then they're out there making weapons, like real weapons. Like I remember like sharpening sticks and stuff on and to see him in the shop doing it and all that, so cool.
Well, and in fact, that's one of the things, if I could go back, like change something about the movie, that was my favorite part, is that scene where he's like sharpening up the stakes and they're stealing the archery equipment. And first of all, it's like that one kid who's doing all the work to get them ready to fight. All the other kids are like, I don't know what they're doing, but he was the one doing all the heavy lifting there. But I wish they'd extended that part out and we got to see even more of that. Like I would have loved to have seen some like booby traps of like, like different things they set up to do that. I think about some other movies like, Home Alone or like Swiss Family Robinson. Like those are always my favorite parts, where they like get ready for that big fight and it builds it up, I think, even more.
Big montage.
And so this is like, we have 24 hours and they did like a couple clips. I wish they'd been able to definitely extend it out a little bit. But I definitely get, and then the whole clubhouse thing and wanting to like, I never had one, but like I always wanted one. So that definitely hit home for me too.
Yeah,
as being pretty
sucked into it.
Pretty awesome.
So you had mentioned I can't remember his name. The one with you said scared of the dark.
Eugene.
Eugene, yeah. So that was another thing with the monsters, and you talk about Dracula's poor moves earlier, and how he had sent Frankenstein to get the book, but prior to that, you see the mummy in Eugene's closet for no apparent reason.
Right, yeah. Why was it there?
So when I watched it again, the first time watching it again, I'm like, wait, what? Why? Why is the mummy in the closet? And then I'm watching it, when I watch it the next time, I'm watching that scene again, and it's like, so did Dracula send the mummy to go get the book first? The mummy failed miserably because he was hanging out in the closet, and then the dad comes in, and he just sneaks out the window afterwards. Yeah. Because the mummy is scared. I don't know what's happening with the mummy, but yeah, that was another thing. When you mentioned Eugene, I thought.
And there are a few other things like that too that kind of threw me off. Like one of the things was, why does Dracula use such a stupid fake name? So like his fake name is literally Dracula backwards. Yes. Like you're this badass bad guy, and you can't come up with a better like fake name.
And what was up with the kid that's like, somebody called for me. Well, let me check out this anagram.
Yeah, that was that one. And then there are a few others I had noted in here. What else did I have? That one threw me off. Oh wait, the scene where they're like, we need to get a virgin, and they go and they ask Rudy. They're like, do you know any virgins? I'm gonna be like, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, when I was around their age, I'm pretty sure almost everybody I knew that was a girl was a virgin. Like they're like, you know, hey, do you know anybody that's a virgin? It would have been weirder for me if they were like, do you know somebody that's actually had sex? Like that would have been like, oh, and then nobody even thinks about the little sister, right? Except like. That made a lot more sense.
But they didn't know what a virgin was.
Well, yeah. So, and then, but yet, they obviously knew about a few other things because of some of the language they were using and things too. So that threw me off. And then, how easy some of the monsters were to kill. Like, all it took to kill Gilman was a shotgun.
Yeah.
Like, anybody could have easily taken him out. Like,
but I don't... the Gilman or Swamp Monster or whatever, any iteration, I don't never picture them as very powerful. He's literally the Aquaman of the Monster Squads or the monsters. So, how much value is he outside of the water?
Right.
I think after he lifted Frankenstein up, he was done.
Yeah.
Like they
that was his only contribution to it. The mummy died fairly easily, but that was the unraveling thing.
That was clever.
Yeah. And that kid's apparently a great shot
yes.
with a bow and arrow from a moving vehicle, right? It's not like they showed him
No, he had that right on.
That was pretty interesting. I had something else too. Did you notice the armadillo in the movie?
Yes, I did.
That's kind of interesting, right? Instead of using a rat, they used an armadillo. I guess that was like a homage to another Dracula movie where because I definitely was like, Googled why was there an armadillo in Monster Squad because I thought that was really strange.
I thought that myself. Actually, when I was taking my audio notes, that was one of them. I was like, wait a minute, why is there an armadillo there? I was like, that was a choice.
Yeah. I thought it was strange that the kids, and so when we first see those kids, they're at the principal's office, and it appears they got sent there for drawing pictures.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, I have a little bit of experience with schools and stuff. I don't think I've ever seen a kid sent to the office to talk to the principal because they're drawing pictures. So that seemed a little strange to me. I thought that was kind of weird.
They do explain it. He says it's because they weren't listening. They're supposed to be listening and not drawing pictures. So this is also the Footloose era.
Yes.
You can't dance.
Yes. I was going to say, like, nowadays kids are like, swearing at us and throwing things. And we still can't send them to the office. So, and then the thing that stood out the most was actually the scary German guy. So we have the scary German neighbor, which I kind of get, like, he's that stranger who lives in like the kind of haunted looking house, and he's from afar, he's got the accent, and I guess still at that time people from Germany are kind of, you think back on that. So I get why they put him in there, but then there's this scene that's very like emotional and powerful where they're like, a lot about monsters, and he says, now that you mention it, I guess I do. And he closes the door, and then you can see the concentration camp numbers written on him. And it's like, wow, that got really serious for a moment. But then they never like go back to that again, or like, so you just have this like connection to the Holocaust and Hitler, and then nothing else about it.
That's all you need.
Came out of nowhere. Okay, great. So that I thought was kind of interesting, and that also brings up one of the other things that's not very politically correct when they're like, oh, that's like a dude on welfare. Like they're talking about his house, and they're like referred to it as
was it the German guy's house?
Yeah, and they're like, oh, it's just some guy on welfare that lives there. And I was like, oh, again,
that line.
that's a little cringy too. But yeah, so there are definitely some things in the movie that sort of are.
So that scene in particular, and then there's some real like solid movie moments, I think, for me in that movie, in the sense of like if it weren't in the Monster Squad, I could see it in another movie where it would be great, and it was great in these movies, in this movie. But like, so that Holocaust, or not the Holocaust scene, the number scene, right after noticing that, I was thinking about how they really, like, I don't know, it stood out. Like after he shuts the door and then they pan to the thing, And I almost thought to myself, and I don't like rewriting movies because people write a movie and it comes out as it does, and great. But like, I almost think it would be better if they showed it as he's shutting the door, and like you could see it, the audience can see it,
right?
And they can have those conversations. And I feel like maybe if that movie was made today, that's probably what they'd do.
Yeah.
And you'd have, oh, did you catch this Easter egg?
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. So I think there's that, and then you had mentioned the parents fighting. I think those scenes were intense. Like those were like intense fighting scenes. Like, why is this in this movie? But not why is this in this movie, but you don't expect to see it there.
Right, and that's actually, like, I thought that was a pretty realistic portrayal, and, like, a really good portrayal of, like, parents who are going through a, trouble in their marriage, and, like, nobody's really at fault. And, like, it was like, that seems like a fairly realistic, good portrayal. It's one of the things that was, really good. But it is kind of an interesting... dynamic of the movie. And
that their relationship is, as much as it doesn't have anything to do with the movie, it carries through into others. So the scene where the mother's tucking the daughter into bed, and doing the good nights and all that stuff. And the daughter, the little girl in that movie, is an amazing actress.
Oh yeah, she was like,
I don't know where they found her, and I've never seen her in anything else. But she's really good for the age she was.
Maybe it was one of those things where she like knew this was her masterpiece, and then she was like, "I'm going out on top. No, I don't need to do anything else."
So when she's leaving, when the mom's leaving the room. The daughter says something like, "Are you gonna yell at him, or are you gonna be mad at him, or whatever?" And she assumes that she's talking about her whatever it was, and it's like, "No, it's her brother." And so like that carryover, like, oh man, this is effective. It's like,
that was
interesting to put that in there.
And when I saw that on the rewatch, I was like, oh yeah, I even remember as a kid seeing that moment, being like. Oh yeah, like that was a great, like a good moment, how they connected that to the, showed the impact on the kids. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. That's good.
There was another, I mean, the other thing was when they're in the clubhouse and they're getting ready to go. Basically, they're coming down to, it might have been after he gets a phone call and finds out that Dracula's after him and all that stuff. And so they're up in the clubhouse and Perv's looking at the other kid's sister, and they start talking, and then the lead character. Do you remember his name?
The lead character.
Yeah.
No, now because I watched Goonies after, so I keep saying Mikey. But hold on, I know his name. I have it written down somewhere.
André.
No, I don't have it written down.
Well, the kid, André, who plays the lead character, says, he basically like shuts him down, like yells at him, like, guys, this is serious, blah, blah, blah. And like, it just gets super serious all of a sudden. Like, he gains absolute control of those kids. And it's like, wow, this is heavy. Yeah. And at the same time, they have a scene where the picture of the sister is being held up for all the kids to jump and try to see, even her brother.
I had that down too. That was another one of the weird things. Like, I was looking through my notes, I'm like, oh yeah, that was strange. I was definitely like, maybe, I'd like to think maybe he's trying to get it back from them so they can't watch it. But yeah, it definitely seems, and he has no problem with the fact that they're all clearly spying on his sister changing.
Right.
And so that was a little weird. I did think it was strange too. Like, so there's a scene where they're asking her, they want to ask her if she's a virgin because they want to get her to help. And like, they can't just ask her like, are you a virgin? Like, why? Or like, have you ever had sex? Like, they were like beating her around. I guess it was supposed to be kind of funny, but that always struck me as odd too. Like, just to ask her. Instead, they said, have you ever been dorked? Which I did like that term. And I think we need to bring that term back.
Dork has been neglected over the years.
Yeah, I think that's the only time I've ever used the word or heard the term dork used in that way. So that was definitely an interesting thing. I thought of another as I was going through my notes too. Another thing where Dracula is kind of stupid. Did you notice his car? So if he wants to be inconspicuous, which would make more sense, like don't be noticed if you want to do this, but he's driving around in a hearse with a big like skull on the front of it. Like that was strange too. But anyway,
that reminds me of the partner cop who. Mr. Comedy Relief.
I love that guy. I thought he was great.
So I've seen him in a lot of other movies. I remember him from other movies and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot he's in this movie. And I liked him, but I couldn't. I liked him, but I didn't.
You didn't like him.
I did like him, but I didn't at the same. It was weird because he just didn't. He wasn't taking it serious enough. And it just seemed, and I think that the dad, the partner, he took my stance well in trying to tone him down, turn it down stuff. But like the police in general, actually in that town. So when he's in the car, and I think he might have, and the reason the hearse made me think about it, I think he's getting a description of the hearse. You know, it's got a skull on the front, whatever. And so he's talking to dispatch, and they start joking about people missing, and then a second person missing is like, it's like, oh, you got your hands full. It's like, what is happening?
Right, you clearly live in a very small town. When you have people go missing, like all these weird reports, wouldn't that kind of stand out to you? Like that something strange is happening? And he's definitely the cliche, like buddy cop kind of thing. He's also, I think, the only person of color in the movie, and then gets killed.
Does he?
What? Get killed?
Does he get killed?
Yeah, he's in the cop car.
Yes,
Dracula throws. Talk about again, badass Dracula. He's like, I'm just gonna kill you with some dynamite here and blow you up. Which another weird thing was, so they've got cops firing guns. Dracula throwing dynamite around because he also blows up the clubhouse. Yep. Remember in that scene, and yet the mom never is like, what's going on? Like when he first blows up the clubhouse, you think the mom would come running out like, what's going on? And then see Dracula, and then you're like, ah. But instead, she's like inside for the whole thing, and then she comes running out after Dracula's already like taken off, and she's like, what's happening? Like I thought, I'm like, where was she this whole time?
I don't even remember seeing her afterwards. So
so that was interesting. So okay, so are we ready to talk about Goonies now? Because I think you can't have a conversation about this movie without having a conversation about Goonies. Because Goonies is like, I mean, if you ask anybody our age, I think Goonies was, if it may not be their favorite movie, but it's definitely a movie that was like,
they've seen it.
A huge movie for kids our age back in the day.
Sure.
And so a lot of people, I think, would say that this movie rips off Goonies. And while I don't think that, and so that's one of the reasons I was kind of wondering, like, was this movie, or was Goonies already kind of like well known, the storyline, before this was written? But time-wise, you wouldn't think that would happen because one came out in '86, one came out a year later. Mm-hmm. But there really are a ton of things that are absolutely the same. Like, they both have the group of kids, and there's a lot of like connections with the group of kids. So you kind of have like your normal kid who's sort of like the leader of the gangs of kids, Mikey, and who the kid played by André. And then you've got you have Mouth in Goonies, which is Corey.
Patrick. Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And his counterpart would be Patrick, right? And then you've got Chunk and Fat Kid. Mm-hmm. You've got Eugene, who I guess his counterpart would be like Dada from Goonies, but they're different. So there's definitely a difference there. You have Bran, the older brother in Goonies. I don't know who his opposite would be. Maybe Rudy.
It would have to be.
Yeah, who I guess is a little bit older than those other kids.
He's a tough guy.
Right, he's a tough guy. So there's definitely like a connection there, right? And then you've got Sloth in Goonies, who is remember? So he's kind of like Frank, who ends up, you think, oh, he's a monster, which, awful describing Sloth that way, but like, but he ends up helping them out and saving the day. There's a scene where Frank and Sloth both have their moment where they come in towards the end when the client, it looks like they're losing, right? And then they come in and help save the day. There's a scene where Sloth is holding up a big boulder to let the kids through and then gets crushed by it. And you think, oh no, he's dead. Kind of like Frank gets crushed when the house, in the house, and then he comes back. There's even like the way they are like learning slang and how to talk from the kids, and they have like these funny lines where they say something that's, they learn from the kids and it kind of sounds funny coming from them. The music is very similar, although that might have to do with the time of it. There's a scene where the kids are eating pie at Scary German's house, and they're kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll eat the pie. And then there's a scene in Goonies where they're at the Fratelli's the restaurant, and they're like having the water, and they're scared to. So like, there's clearly a lot of things that are very, very similar.
So in Goonies, they have the ice cream scene too, where Chunk's like chowing down on the ice cream, and same thing with Horace. He's like loving the pie.
Right, exactly. So there really is a lot of connections there, which I found was kind of interesting because, again, it's like, so was it influenced by Goonies? Was it trying to rip it off? Or did it just happen to have all these sort of similarities? But, so then which movie's better? Like, are you a Goonies fan? Did you like Goonies? Like, Goonies, for me, I said was my favorite movie as a kid. I used to rent it all the time. So I would still say that's probably my favorite. But yeah, what did you think of Goonies?
So I liked Goonies, and I loved it as a kid. It's one of those movies for me to go back to. I've seen it a few times. I think the last time I watched it and probably really enjoyed it was when we all watched it together over at Lucha's house.
Yep.
And back in high school, and I think one or two people hadn't seen it. Or at least one person had never seen Goonies before, and we're all like, you gotta watch this movie.
I can't believe somebody hadn't seen Goonies before.
Yeah. Were you there that night?
I don't know. I think so, probably.
But anyway, so that was the last time I watched it. And I think part of that was like the whole group experience. Like you're sitting there watching with a bunch of friends, and we watch a bunch of friends doing their cool thing. So I think that movie gears well for that. As I've watched it by myself, I can watch it, I enjoy it, but I'm not like psyched about it. Like Monster Squad for me, like watching it again. And even now, Monster Squad, if I were to be flipping through the channels, I don't really flip through channels anymore, it's hard to do. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it's a movie that I'd stop and watch the whole thing.
Right, well, it's definitely, And
if I catch a scene or two, I'd probably do that. And Goonies is probably the same way. But
and obviously a big appeal people would be like the nostalgia factor too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I didn't love Monster Squad because of from my childhood, I don't know how much I would really, like you said, I don't know if it would hold my interest today, but watching it and being like, oh yeah, I remember how good this was. So I was comparing the two as I was watching them. I was kind of like, in my mind being like, okay, which one's better? Because I wanted to determine. I always thought Monster Squad or Goonies, was my favorite movie, but I was like, well, Monster Squad was pretty good too. So I was rating them. So one of the things I was thinking about was sort of the opening to the movie. Mm-hmm. So in Goonies, you have this you have the Fratellis break out of jail, and there's like this big car chase, and they're shooting off guns, and it's going all around the town. And so like you see Chunk like playing video games or eating food or something, and they go flying by. And then and then obviously Monster Squad, you have the Van Helsing thing. So I leaned Goonies on that. I thought that was a win for Goonies. I thought that was a better opening. In fact, I was watching this with my wife, Monster Squad, and she actually was kind of like, oh, this beginning's really boring. It's too slow. So definitely Goonies jumps you right in there. From a bad guy perspective, I thought it was actually a really close call because the Fratellis are pretty good bad guys, especially Mama Fratelli. I don't know if you remember her. She's the same one from Don't Throw Mama from the Train. And she's a scary lady. Yeah. But then, how can you beat Dracula and Frankenstein? All that. Monsters, so I definitely leaned Monster Squad for that one. As far as the kid characters, I think for the most part, I like Chunk better than Horace. I thought he was a little funnier. Horace just seemed a little forced with the whole fat kid thing for me.
Horace he didn't have nearly as maybe I guess I don't remember Goonies in detail. Yeah. But I feel like Chunk was a more prominent character than Horace was.
And Mouth I thought was a better character than Patrick. I thought I did like Rudy. I think he's kind of cool. Aside from the lighting a match on his foot thing and dressing like he's from the 50s, like he belongs in Greece. But I thought he was better than Bran.
But you were okay with him taking pictures of the sister? Is that
well, yes, yeah, I totally support that. And then using those to force her to go fight monsters. I thought the story was pretty equal. I thought the going off and looking for the buried treasure and going through the booby traps was pretty cool. And this is a good story as well. The soundtracks I thought were pretty comparable. So the main song from Goonies is "Good Enough" by Cyndi Lauper. And so like song. And I like Cyndi Lauper, she's cool. Monster Squad had the song at the end, the
Monster Squad,
right?
And I really wanted to record my own version of that, just get like the little beats and stuff and do that. I might still do that, but
but like I thought that song was kind of like in a funny way. It was kind of like pretty cool too. The good enough what that has going for it is there's a music video. If you've never seen it, you should check it out. It's got the Goonies in it, and it's also got all kinds of wrestlers, professional wrestlers in it. So it's like two things I loved as a kid.
Oh wait, does that have Captain Blue in it?
Yeah,
okay.
And the Iron Sheik's in it, and some other people. So that kind of made me move towards Goonies for the soundtrack. But so the big thing though that Monster Squad has, that I think Goonies really lacks, is Monster Squad had way better quotes, like quotable scenes, and like some big scenes. So like obviously the biggest one, the one that everybody that's seen Monster Squad knows, is Wolfman's got nards.
Right.
Like that is, I've probably quoted that line a bajillion times in my life, and way more so than I've ever quoted anything from Goonies. But it has a lot of other good ones. So we've talked about Horace, right? So one of the best scenes in that one is when he kills Gilman, and they call him Fat Kid. And he pumps the shotgun and says, my name is Horace. Like that's a kick-ass. Yeah. That's a kick-ass line. Rudy, when he goes to the 3 female vampires are coming down the street, and he goes out there to like kill them, and they're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? He's like, I'm in the goddamn club, aren't I? And like that was pretty badass when he was going out there. So there's a lot of awesome ones. At the very end when they're like, who are you? And he goes, we're the Monster Squad. Yeah. Like that's a great line. And like even the one they say, who was it that they're talking to, and they hit him with a bat. Wolfman. Yeah. Right? So Wolfman's about to kill the kid's dad, and he goes, hey, asshole. And he turns around, and he wails him with the bat. He's like, you look. Yeah. Like, that was a great line.
And when that scene came up, I had forgotten about that. And I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that. Because I remember we used to do that kind of thing.
Right. Actually, I used to do that. Like, I'd quote that all the time as a kid. Absolutely. Even the one, and this one's not, as catchy as the others, but like the scene where the sister finally reads that thing in German, and they're like, it didn't work. And they're like, you're not a virgin, are you? And she says, well, Steve, but he doesn't count. Right. And they're like, doesn't count. Like, I remember that line as a kid. So that's one thing that I do think Monster Squad has going for it that Goonies didn't, is these awesome, memorable lines. Like, these are good lines. You talked about how there are like certain scenes that would work great in other movies and stuff. Like, those lines are classic. Yeah. Like, they are good. They were well done. So anyway, I think I still lean Goonies, just for me, because I like I said, every time I went to the video store, I literally would rent the Goonies and like one other film or something like that. And so I watched that movie all the time as a kid. But Monster Squad was a closer battle than I thought, and Monster Squad was pretty good. So
I think that has all those quotes especially. I think that has a lot to do with Shane Black. In that cool factor. Like, if you think about, he wrote Predator, and like if you think about Predator and Arnold Schwarzenegger's lines and stuff throughout the movie, and every other person's lines and stuff throughout the movie, and all of those like cool factors, like that's his gift to the screenplay or whatever.
That was like his thing, is setting up these like great lines. Yeah,
it's like here you go. Just like pulls out these index cards. Here, we'll use this one.
He probably does just sit around and like, what would be a good line, badass line for a movie? Yeah,
put it in anywhere. So going back, if I'm trying to think of the order, so what you had said, the beginning part and comparing the two.
Yeah,
I think Goonies is a better opener for Goonies in that. What I like about that one is there's the action, the car chase. You can't go wrong with the car chase unless you do, and you shouldn't be doing it. But the fact that one of the Goonies is kind of introduced, sort of, and that actually he's on his way to the kid's house and stuff. So it flows really well that way. And I like how that's, and I couldn't compare it to the rest of the movie and how that flow works, but if the rest of the movie works as smoothly as it does, I think that's awesome. with the Monster Squad's beginning, I think where it's a different type of movie for a monster movie, for like setting a scary tone or whatever, and if the idea is it's for the audience that is into those old monster movies and stuff, and if that armadillo is a callback to an old Dracula movie, then I mean that's just what it's doing. It's saying, right, here's your monster movie, and then you cut straight into the kids in the school at that point, right?
Right.
And I think that's an interesting way to. I don't think it's worse. I think it works well for that because it goes from that, oh, we're in this monster movie, and then bam, oh, here's the kids.
And it clearly serves the purpose of giving you kind of the backstory that you need. While there's a lot of things about the backstory that don't make sense, like at least that's setting up everything that comes after it. But right. So I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad beginning. I just like the one that jumps us right into the action. I thought was a lot more fun. Is kind of where I'm going with that.
I definitely agree. I mean, they're just different. I think what was that second one you said?
Second, I was talking about the character. Oh, the bad guys.
Oh, yeah. So, I think monsters. Monsters versus...
They have to win.
Yeah.
Just by default.
That's it. They got a lot more going for them. Although, I like the personality of the Fratellis, obviously. Like, you've got your family, and they're all great actors. That was another thing. Monster Squad had nobody in this movie. I don't, except for the partner, the comic relief. And the Wolfman. I recognize him from other stuff. And I recognize the dad from a few other things.
Right.
But nothing that I'm like...
Yeah, if you go on IMDB and look up these people, there's not much out there from that.
But Goonies, I think, probably had a much better budget or something. Or more actors.
Well, even look who's attached to it. Goonies was written by Christopher Columbus. Oh. It was produced by Steven Spielberg.
Sure,
It was directed by Richard Donner. and if you look at all the kid actors in there, so many of them went on to have, tons of other movies that came out that were big. That has Sean Astin. It has Corey Feldman, right?
Yeah,
so that's the right one. And then it has
Brolin. Josh Brolin.
Right. So
Thanos himself.
and even some of the other the Andy, the girl that played Andy.
Yeah.
She was in Lucas. That was another really popular movie in the '80s. And then it had Martha Plimpton, who did a bunch of other things. So they definitely.
They all And so. Yeah, there must have a budget.
Well, and some of those people might not have been super well known at that time. I don't know. I was 6 when Goonies came out, so I don't know what the careers of those people were before.
Right.
Goonies,
well, you think Richard Donner? I'm just talking.
The people that did it, obviously attached to it, were huge.
And then, I think but even with not knowing any of those people in the Monster Squad, I think they. Like I said, the little girl was amazing.
She was really good.
No idea where she came from.
Yep.
She reminds me of there's one other little girl scene that in a different movie that I'm like, wow, that was really good. Yeah. In the Santa Claus, one of them, the little girl starts talking to her brother about believing or something. Yeah. I don't remember. It's this monologue, and it's really good.
Phenomenal child actress.
But I think that. What was the other question?
Other things I was talking about on there, just the group of kids. Which one had the better group of kids?
I think that they're the same for the most part.
Pretty much the same for you. And then just think about in general the story, the conflict of the story, the problem in the story, and sort of what happens in the story.
I like Goonies more. In the sense that it was a choice versus Monster Squad, where it was a threat they were responding to. Kind of. Well, it was kind of a choice. Well, no, because they had to protect themselves from the monsters. Right. The monsters attacked them. But with Goonies, it was a choice. They wanted to go on this treasure hunt. Yeah. They found themselves. It's a true adventure. It's a true, cool thing.
Yeah.
But all in all, I think I gotta watch Goonies again. I think after talking about it a little bit more, I'm like, I kind of do want to see it again now. So
then the other thing obviously in the '80s, these movies where kids go on these adventures and save the day was sort of a thing. I was trying to think of what are some other movies that came out back then that were like that.
So talking about groups of kids or kids in general?
Well, I think groups of kids, but maybe a single kid. But Space Camp which I don't know if you've ever seen Space Camp. Yeah, so Space Camp was sort of the same thing. It's like we're going to send this group of kids off in space accidentally, and they're going to have to
Roller Babies.
Which one?
Roller Babies.
I have not seen Roller Babies.
Not Roller Solar Babies.
Solar Babies. Okay.
But they're on rollerblades.
Okay.
Roller skates. So
I don't know that one. My wife was telling me about the Explorers.
Yep.
I've never seen that.
That's
either.
another space one. They build. Did she tell you about the plot?
No.
So basically, they take a tilt-a-whirl and build a spaceship.
Oh, makes sense. Yeah, but I mean, but there is something about that genre that I absolutely love, and I even like like other movies. All right, we're back. So so we're talking about other movies from around that time period. So. Red Dawn was one I loved.
Yeah,
and that's a little different because it skews older. Like they were high school kids, and they're literally killing. I mean, I guess there was killing Monster Squad, but they're killing Russians or whatever. Yeah. But that was the same kind of thing. It was that idea of like these kids are going to step up and save the day. One that actually was a little after the 80s, I think it was 91, was a movie called Toy Soldiers, which has Sean Astin in it. I love that movie. But yeah, same kind of thing. So those movies where you have these kids.
School Ties.
Oh yeah.
Although that's more of a
more like a social bullying kind of thing and stuff, isn't it? Like, because he's Jewish.
Yeah.
But the group of kids that are dealing with this like outside threat, and they have to go on this adventure, stop them. I just love. And so what that made me think about too was, so what does that look like today? Like,
have you ever seen Attack the Block?
I have not.
That Boyega.
Oh yeah.
He's in it.
Okay.
It's a few years old.
Yeah.
But yeah, it takes place in England someplace, and aliens come down, and it's John Boyega and a bunch of kids. Fighting the aliens and stuff. It's pretty cool, actually. You should check it out. They're making a sequel to it. That's coming out. At some point. Yeah. So that's the most recent one that I can.
I guess Stranger Things would kind of fit into that mold, and that's probably why Stranger Things is obviously that's got the throwback to the the 80s or not stuff as well, but like I think that's probably why people our age loved it because it reminds us of all those things from our childhood. But I was trying to think of others.
I think the 80s, like those types of movies, because all of those movies that we're talking about, they all take place in that same time. Like they all came out in that same time, and I feel like into the 90s, that's when you get into your TV shows, like your Nickelodeon, your all the crazy Carissa Explains and all like all that. And I think and when you said Stranger Things, that made me think of it because that's probably the last thing that we've seen, and it was a TV show. Yeah. So I think that's kind of where it went into, and you don't see that many movies because there was the Animal Buddy adventure stuff for a while, but that's not that. That was different. And the things I can think of again, it's probably because a lot of my kids were watching some of those Disney shows or Nickelodeon shows. They are kids save the day kind of stuff, but they're very much like watered down, kind of like nothing edgy, kind of cheesy. Stuff. Stranger Things is probably actually the best comp because that one actually is kind of scary, and even though it's kids, it skews older. Although that I would say is definitely scarier than like Monster Squad was. So and part of that's probably due to like the special effects are so much different than they were back then. How scary can you get with like Wolfman looking like Wolfman does in that movie? I was just thinking about how if you wanted to remake that movie or like what how would that look today? Well, how would you remake that? I would change some of the language. Yeah. I mean, clearly you could keep some of that edge if you wanted to, but you'd have to. I think so. I mean, if you go, well, I already talked about that Holocaust scene. It would be more subtle in those things, and I don't think that's just me. I think anybody making a movie today would be a lot more subtle, and there would be a lot more inside-y jokes, I think, but the armadillos were pretty inside. I never would have known. I do think, though, if you were going to try to remake that today, it would be a little bit hard because of the way special effects are, and I think movies just tend to be gorier today anyway, it is going to be, it would definitely have a scarier feel because the characters aren't going to, I watch those and I think, they look very comic-y, some of those characters and stuff. And so as a kid, I didn't like scary movies as a kid. And I think I wasn't scared of that movie. And I think because it seemed more
campy or whatever. Like, but if you're gonna do it today with today's special effects, and Wolfman's gonna look probably a hell of a lot scarier than he did there. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you know who did it?
Kind of hard.
Joss Whedon has done it with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now that I think of it, did you watch that show at all?
Yeah, some. Yeah.
Yeah. So I watched the whole thing. I love that series, and that's essentially the Monster Squad. It's that same vibe going through. Kids in school, and they're fighting monsters week to week, and they're doing those quips and stuff. Like, they've got all of those the words, but it also gets very serious in parts. Yeah. I mean, it's more than 86 minutes, but so they have a lot more time.
Right.
And the storylines, some of them, they get some deep stuff in there that you don't necessarily notice right at first, and then when I'm watching it again a little bit older, it's like, oh, wait a minute. There's one of the episodes eventually deals with like a school shooting and stuff, but you see some of the characters develop in the background that you like that are ignored and stuff, and then it boils up into like this person's a school shooter at some point, and I don't know if they planned it that way or whatever, but like it happened to be. But those types of storylines get weaved into like this ridiculous idea of vampires and monsters and stuff in this one little town, and so I think Buffy the Vampire Slayer probably came closest to it.
Yeah, well, and Stranger Things is probably pretty close to. I think. I mean,
I don't see the wittiness, like the lines or anything. There's nothing memorable for me from the things people say.
And I would definitely agree with that. But it definitely has that outcast group of kids. They're kind of dorky, and they have to, and they got some of their older siblings, and the cool kid, Steve helping him out and all that. If you were going to remake it today, so do you, that whole idea of like pulling in all these like villains from different things, like that'd be kind of interesting. So like, who do you pull in? Like, do you get the guy from Terminator 2, like I'm trying to think of like who are some of these like really cool, because again you're not going to take bad guys from like right now, because they were reaching back to get some of these monsters from these old monster movies to bring in. So I want to reach back to some movies that I remember. Who are the real good villains in movies that were out in the 80s and 90s that you might grab?
Pat, you've just tapped into one of the ideas that I have had for the past little bit. Like, I really want to get together with some people, like, on a regular basis and just create a multiverse. Like, just crossover. Like, just talk and, like, all right, Terminator 2 guy is in here. And I think that could be done by, like, I don't know. Anyway, that's side topic. Yeah. I want to get back to that at some point. But yeah, I think, so my first thought would be Universal had tried to bring back the monster movies a few years ago. Like, they did a Dracula movie to start. That didn't do well, so they made another Dracula movie. And then they did The Mummy. And I thought they did another one, but I don't remember. But they were trying to do it, and it just fizzled out. They stopped doing it. I was all excited. I was like, that'd be really cool, because they wanted to do like basically like the Marvel universe and bring them all together. And they had some tie-ins like with the after credit scenes and all that. Yeah. So I think they could certainly, if Universal wanted to like try that again, they should go this route. Yeah. Like say, all right, this is how we're gonna do it. You're gonna have a group of kids, the Monster Squad that goes through. But if we were to do it with people from like before, you'd have to have Terminator.
Yeah, well, the most obvious ones would be Freddy, Jason, Mike Myers. But that almost seems like it's, and I guess that would be the closest, because these monsters, the Dracula and all those. If you think back to the horror movies of old, those were the bad. So like then the horror movies that we grew up with, it was those. But I feel like that's kind of. I'm trying to go a little bit more out there with...
And I think you'd have to, because I think those characters... Dracula was the most prominent character in the Monster Squad. He had the most personality. And I think in general, with the monsters as a whole, Dracula has that personality. Yeah. In every iteration as a personality. Versus, I don't know, Gilman...
Right. Yeah.
Frankenstein. Yeah. And the Mummy.
Right.
So... And compare that to if you were to take a Freddy, Jason, and a Mike Myers. They all have personalities. They all have strong personalities. They've carried their own movies, so it'd be very hard to to put them together and make something that doesn't trip over itself.
Now I've never seen, because again, horror movies are not my thing, so I never saw like Freddy versus Jason.
Right.
But like, I also can't see all those guys working well together. It feels like they would, you know.
What would be the motivation to?
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, okay. What are some other?
So I think you could do. Well, you got Alien Predator's been done.
So I was gonna say, yeah, you got those guys.
I'd have to go like obscure. Like I would say you bring like the villain from Leonard Part 6. Have you ever seen that movie?
No.
Bill Cosby.
Oh.
He's like, I don't know, he's a secret agent or something. I don't remember what it is. He rides an ostrich at some point in the movie. Yeah. But like something like villains from those types of movies that you don't know about at all, but maybe you've seen the movie but you don't remember who the bad guy was.
Yeah.
I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
I can't. Leonard Part 6 is the first one that I think of.
So I'm gonna have to think about, like, because I'm having trouble thinking of some really cool bad guys. So I'm gonna have to like put some thought into this.
For me, like, and it may be our age. Like I grew up. A lot of the bad guys I think of are like video game bad guys. Like like all your Street Fighter bad guys. And all your the monsters from Contra or whatever, Super Mario stuff.
So you can bring in like Shredder and Bowser.
Yeah, you know what? Shredder would be a good bad guy.
He was a pretty cool bad guy. Skeletor, I always like Skeletor as a bad guy.
I would do Shredder as, you know what? I would do Skeletor as like the leader.
Yeah.
But I'd change him up so he's a little bit more. He's not like cheesy. Like he's come around. Maybe he has a mask on or something to start, and like it eventually comes off. But he's not in a cloak and all that stuff. But he's the mastermind. Maybe he's running stuff behind the scenes, and then you bring in, I don't know, Cobra Commander.
Yeah, I was gonna say Cobra Commander. Yeah. So maybe that's what we need to do. Is we need to go with like our favorite cartoons, kind of bad guys. But
if you think about it, I mean, the movie monsters and stuff, those are geared towards kids, I would
guess.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, that would very work well.
Wile E. Coyote, for sure.
Yeah. He'd fit right in with the others.
Yeah. Taz.
Yeah.
No, I think, I really would like to see a remake of it, see somebody do something with it. And I think Universal has the opportunity.
to really step it up. I actually, one of the things I did see, so again, after watching the movie, is that they were at one point talking about doing a TV series.
Oh, really?
Like not like a probably more like a streaming like limited 8-episode kind of thing. Maybe they bring it back every year, kind of like a Stranger. Yeah. So I think in recent years they've been talking about doing Monster Squad, remaking Monster Squad in that way, which might be kind of interesting. But,
yeah, I'll probably watch it.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? Are we still going to watch watch the documentary and see if there's anything that comes out in that would be interesting to add on to our discussion about it?
Yes. I am definitely up for that. I've seen the documentary. Ooh, do I watch it? No.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch it yet. So I say we watch the documentary and I'm going to take notes this time. So I don't have to be like, would you ask?
Yeah. I got my my book. Well, that's just because I know I'm going to sit down to talk about it and be like, I don't remember the movie at all.
Well, because you said you took notes, I didn't take notes. At that point, I was like, I was gonna take notes during that second time, and like I said, I started talking about him.
But really, I think that's also kind of fitting of our personalities. Like you definitely are. I don't know. Like I'm the kind of person that needs to take notes, and you're whatever pops. Like. And they both work. We have our methodologies. What I like about discussing this with you is like you were definitely thinking about some things that were a little bit deeper than I was as far as like the making of the movie and the story and how it was put together, so I think that's really nice because I was definitely having different thoughts. So you definitely made me think of some things I hadn't been thinking about.
Well, that's one of the things when I watch movies now compared to when I watched movies before, just because unfortunately I think we've gotten to a point where every story has been told. I don't think I've seen a story.
Like everything's influenced by something.
Right. So we can't say... There's very little that's like super original. So like when I see a movie, I'm not looking necessarily at the story. It's like how that story is presented, and I just start thinking about those things that make sense to me. So like Birdman is a great movie for me. I don't remember the story that much, but I did like
remember
that
movie.
Yeah,
they did
the movie and that movement through it, and we talked recently about Kimmy and that coffee cup or bottle or whatever it was and all that stuff, which I did finish the movie yesterday. Well, I'm glad that I finished it because I stopped at like with 20 minutes left in the movie. Have you seen it?
No.
If you see it, watch the whole thing, because I stopped at 20 minutes left in the movie and I was like, maybe I'll come back to it. And I went back to it and it was amazing at the end.
Okay.
But,
is it worth watching?
Oh, yeah. That's really good. But yeah, so we'll watch what's it called again?
Wolfman's Got Nards.
Wolfman's Got Nards.
I mean,
yes.
come on. It's a classic line. Yeah.
We'll watch Wolfman's Got Nards, and we will reconvene.
That sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
One person will have nerds.
All right.